Coming up on Network Africa. Rwanda's president pardons the country's former prime minister who was sentenced to 3 years in prison for issuing counterfeit checks. A trial begins for 4 Egyptian officers over the murder of Italian student Giulio Regeni. Plus, a focus on Kenya's worst locust invasion in 70 years. Well, welcome to the program today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. We begin in Rwanda, where a grand gesture from President Paul Kagame would mean freedom for a convict. The president pardoned former Prime Minister Pierre Damien Habyarimana, who had been slammed a 3-year jail term for issuing counterfeit checks. Habyarimana was jailed last year for the fraudulent checks he paid out to creditors at his Kigali-based Christian University of Rwanda, which remains shut for now. He had said during his trial that he had given the checks as a guarantee that the university would pay the creditors and that all the recipients were given some money alongside the checks. He had been ordered to pay a total of $879,000 in damages. Though he's been granted a presidential pardon, he will still have to find the money, and his account will remain frozen and property seized until he pays. In Egypt, trial has begun for 4 senior members of the security services in their absence, with the quartet facing charges over their alleged role in the disappearance and the murder of Italian student Giulio Regeni in Cairo back in 2016. Italy hopes the trial will shed light on a killing that shocked the country and strained ties with Egypt, which has repeatedly denied that its officials had anything to do with Regeni's brutal death. A postgraduate student at Britain's Cambridge University, Regeni disappeared in the Egyptian capital in January 2016. His body was found almost a week later, and a post-mortem examination showed he had been extensively tortured before his death. Italian and Egyptian prosecutors investigated the case together, but the two sides later fell out and came to very different conclusions. Italian prosecutors say Major Magdi Sharif from Egypt's General Intelligence, Major General Tarek Sibir, the former head of state security, Police Colonel Hisham Helmi, and Colonel Athar Kamal, a former head of investigations in Cairo City, were responsible for the aggravated kidnapping of Regeni. Sharif has also been accused of conspiracy to commit aggravated murder. The suspects have never responded publicly to the accusations, and Egyptian police and officials have repeatedly denied an involvement in Regeni's disappearance and killing. The VOA's Edward Yeranian is in Cairo. Edward, great to see you. Is there any reason this trial is taking place without the suspects being present in court?
Well, Amarachi, the Egyptian government is not participating in this trial, so they are not allowing these suspects to testify. I don't know that they would normally, that a government would allow its citizens to participate in a trial abroad over an issue that happened domestically, whatever you think about who is responsible for it. So I don't know that's unusual, but Egypt is not participating in the trial, so it's not given the authorization for these suspects to be interrogated in Italy for the trial.
So we understand the Egyptian and Italian authorities have different perspectives about what happened to Regeni. The Italians say Regeni was kidnapped and tortured and killed by members of the Egyptian security forces. What does the Egyptian government say?
Well, they don't say it in that many words, but I mean, I've been in Egypt, I guess, for 14, 15 years now. I think most of it revolves around the fact that the Egyptian intelligence services believe that they're fighting a constant battle against the Muslim Brotherhood, which wants to come back to power and are trying to overthrow the current government. and they feel or suspect that other foreign governments are participating in these efforts, including Britain, which is where Regini was studying. And I've heard Egyptian intelligence people, retired intelligence people, tell me that they believe that the Brits were using this student to spy on, to gather information about the state, the trade unions, and who was participating, and involving globally the Muslim Brotherhood. And Britain, they say, supports the Muslim Brotherhood. So they use an Italian student, says the Egyptian government, because they thought he would be more sympathetic than a British student, in order to glean information on Egypt. Now, this is their argument.
Yeah, and it does beg the question, why Regeni was murdered in the first place. But to Egypt now, the authorities constantly, they hindered the Italian prosecution with stories about a failed drug deal, a botched robbery, even a crime of passion. Is there any truth whatsoever in these claims?
Well, most of the foreign media says that there isn't. I really don't have any inside information. I don't know these intelligence people, and I really can't say, other than the fact that perhaps if they were responsible, that this was a bit of an accident, because we don't usually have a lot of foreigners getting killed in Egypt, and most of the foreigners I talk to say how safe it is here in Egypt. So it's very unlikely that under normal circumstances that they would target a foreigner. So something obviously unusual happened here. And if they did kill the student, which I don't know for a fact, since I really don't have that information, that something went wrong, or something, there was some unusual trigger that caused it, which is not to justify it, but just to say that it's not a common occurrence here in Egypt.
Just trying to understand, Edward, why the Italian prosecutors would conclude that the Egyptian national security was behind Regeni's death.
Well, the Italians have said that Egypt did not provide all the information they asked for, and that there were critical gaps, and that therefore their conclusion was that Egypt was either fabricating or handing out not misinformation, but incomplete information to throw them off the real trail. That's what they're arguing. Now, is it true or isn't it? I'm not the prosecutor, so I can't really say.
Yeah, I know. But just before you go, Edward, Egypt not participating in this trial. I know that the aim is for justice for Regeni. So how exactly will that be achieved if this is only being focused on one side, and only one side is interested in the outcome of this trial?
Well, I mean, justice is, when you've been in the Middle East for 35 years, as I have, you hear many different sides to this story. I mean, the Egyptians will tell you that you've got 100 million people in this country to feed, and that their security is more important than that of one Italian student. And if you suddenly have international governments putting Egypt under sanctions, you're going to affect the well-being of 100 million people for revenge for one Italian student, assuming that that he was actually killed by the security services. And you can see what that logic has done in Syria, because you've got normal, ordinary people who are being punished by sanctions for things they are not even responsible for. So, I mean, the logic of punishing the Egyptian government for a crime, assuming that it was responsible for it, the Egyptians would argue that would punish the entire nation.
Edward, thanks again for helping us understand this trial and what's going on in the Middle East.
My pleasure, Amarachi.
It's only just a few Libyan cities that are aware of the stakes in the country's peace process and upcoming elections. In Tarona, for example, scores of bodies killed by local militia are still being unearthed from mass graves, the cost of the country's political and security crisis. Tarona's people stand little chance of justice if Libya remains divided between warring factions, but they also fear that the peace process will mean forgetting past crimes or even elevating those who are better than them.
Workers in the Libyan city of Tahuna have spent more than a year exhuming bodies from mass graves that show the cost of a decade of conflict and the high stakes of a fragile peace plan that has left victims on the sidelines. Tahuna was held by the local Kaniyat militia from 2012 until its capture last year by pro-Tripoli government forces, leaving a grisly legacy that has symbolized the North African country's lost decade of anarchy and violence. Usman Al-Suwa, an engineering lecturer, was among those protesting. He said the Kaniyat seized his brother from a Tripoli prison in 2013, brought him back to Tahuna and summarily executed him in his prison clothes.
Our suffering started when my brother Ibrahim Suwai was kidnapped from our Ruwami prison in 2011 and was brought to Taruna from the main prison in Tripoli in cars of Al-Khani. He was executed with live ammunition. They put the gun on his forehead at point-blank range. He was executed by bullet shots while wearing his prison uniform, hands tied.
Families of the dead and missing congregate each Saturday at the main roundabout of the city, where many buildings are still war damaged and burnt out, to seek a fuller investigation and bolder efforts to bring the killers to justice. Not far away, workers in white contamination suits are still uncovering bodies from Tahuna's red soil, with 203 bodies found and 52 identified. City residents have filed 375 missing persons reports so far.
Where are the human rights? I have been crying for 2 years. We are talking about 2 years with no papers. How come a case does not develop for 2 years? I wish I can take the papers to the United Nations. Where are they and where are the human rights?
Osama Al-Suwa and some other Tahuna residents fear the focus of AFTA will divert attention from the Kaniyat militia and mean that crimes it committed before its alliance with the LNA will be brushed aside. However, he's excited about the prospect of parliamentary elections. Still, an uncertain prospect of factions wrangle over the rules as a way to replace a political class has turned a blind eye to abuse.
In other news now, 5 Congolese mixed heritage women separated from their families in the colonial era are suing the Belgian state for crimes against humanity. The women say they were taken away from their black mothers at birth solely on the basis of the color of their skin. The 5 were among thousands of children taken from their families and put into care of a religious order in the colonial era. Most of them were not recognized by their white fathers. Those who have gone to court were not brought to Belgium when the Republic of Congo, as it was then known, gained independence in 1960. Police in Kenya are on the lookout for Mr. Maston Wanjala, a man who confessed to killing more than 10 children after his escape from police cell in Nairobi. Wanjala was due to appear in court on Wednesday over the murder of at least 14 boys in the capital and areas of eastern and western Kenya. Police say they noticed he had disappeared during the morning roll call. He was being detained during police investigations into the series of child killings that shocked the nation. 3 police officers were on duty at the time of his escape from Jogo Road Police Station in the Eastlands area of Nairobi have been arrested. Authorities say the man is extremely dangerous. Meanwhile, Kenya's High Court has declared illegal the rollout of a biometric ID scheme known as Huduma Namba because it went against the country's 2019 Data Protection Act. A court also faulted the government for not assessing how data protection would be impacted before the rollout. A court has also ordered the Interior Ministry to conduct the assessment in line with the law. The Huduma Namba scheme was launched to bring together on one card details about a citizen so they could get easy access to all government services. Sensitive information such as contact details, fingerprints, and a person's profession was collected in 2019. We have more stories coming up on Network Africa Plus. It's day 2 of the Global Business Forum Africa. Leaders are discussing opportunities rising from the COVID-19 pandemic. Stay with us. Welcome back. Still watching Network Africa. It's day 2 at the Global Business Forum Africa and resilience of African economies and opportunities rising in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. Bridging African and Emirati entrepreneurs are shaping the conversations today. Rwandan President Paul Kagame had said that the pandemic is becoming more manageable at this point, but that the manufacturing and supply chains will need to become more resilient, more local, and even more technically advanced. The conversation is also tending towards Africa's tech-savvy youth, and those present are encouraged to create more tech hubs in various countries and in empowering the youth with skills for the future of work. Channel Television's Dubai correspondent Mayowa Adeguki has been covering the meetings. Mayowa joins me now. It is apparent, isn't it? The Nigerian delegation is not at this forum. How is that impacting on the kinds of conversations that leaders are having?
Thank you very much, Amarachi. It's good to see you. And yes, it is quite a shame that Africa's giant is conspicuously absent at this forum. It's the first global business forum on Africa post-COVID. It's part of the expo, and if you remember that this expo is the first in the Africa, Middle East, South Asia region. So Nigeria should be a part of these conversations. We're talking about business. We're talking about recovering from COVID. We're talking about the future. And if Nigeria is Africa's biggest economy, we've got a huge youth population. When you talk about tech, we're there. When you talk about the creative sector, we're there. All of these things. And to be so absent is quite disappointing. In the room, you've got investors from across the UAE. And also note that Nigeria, as a lot of Nigerians have been coming to this region to seek investment and to sort of get into that global market, Nigeria should have been a part of this forum.
Indeed. But let's move on now and talk about the Rwandan president's address earlier today. He talked about changes and opportunities arising from the global pandemic. What were his suggestions?
Now, if there's one thing he said that struck pretty much everyone there, it's that coming away from COVID and recovering now, the economy of 2019 is one they're not looking to return to. He said, we're not going back to the same economy we knew in 2019. Well, one other thing he mentioned a lot was the AfCFTA, which is the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. He talked about the timeliness of this agreement. He also talked about how Africans will need to be more responsible to maximize their strengths and assets. And this is one thing he really hammered on during his speech. He's also talked about how the relationship between Africa and his country, as well as the UAE, has been really doing well. And hopefully we get to see that across board, which is, of course, one of the reasons for such a forum as this.
And the world is becoming more aware, isn't it, of Africa's tech hubs, which are growing by the day. What has been discussed around harnessing that potential of Africa's youth that usually found in this space?
Now, even though we didn't get a Nigerian delegation at the event, Nigeria did pop up in a lot of conversations. And of course, talking about tech, Nigeria did come up in that conversation. Kenya, Rwanda, and Nigeria came up a lot in the tech conversations, and they were praised for what their youth are doing, how despite the odds, you see youth really doing amazing work and pushing the frontier when it comes to tech. Actually, Africa is doing really well on the global stage. Now, conversations were about how do we harmonize all of the efforts in different regions? How do we get all these youth tech hubs to collaborate, come together, and how do we scale? So these are the conversations we're seeing. How do we replicate what's happening in Nigeria, Rwanda, Kenya, I beg your pardon, in other parts of Africa, so that that digital economy can be spread across and we can see Africa really grow really fast. So these are the conversations that that we had during the forum today.
Mayowa, it's always great to see you, and I will be checking back with you for more updates on the Global Business Forum on Africa. Thanks a lot. In 2019, Kenya saw the worst desert locust invasion of the last 70 years. Crops and pastures were hit by the ravenous pest, putting at risk food security and nutrition of thousands of people in the country. And thanks to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the Kenyan government has made great efforts at surveying the damage and revising the control measures. We follow the story of Brian Odhiambo Wajewa and his contribution to the development.
When you spray.
Brian Wajewa is a surgeon and instructor in Kenya's National Youth Service, a voluntary work and educational program for young Kenyan citizens. He's been aware of the danger of locusts to food production and wanted to be part of the solution to bringing the infestation under control. As a result, he took part in trainings and later oversaw a group of 200 service people deployed on desert locust control operations.
I had a motivational factor. When the locust invasion came to this country, it was a menace. We would hear it all over the news, on the televisions.
Sergeant Brian knew that with the ability to multiply 20 times with each generation, travel as far as 150 kilometers per day, and devour vast swathes of crops and pasture land on their way, desert locusts are a great threat to food security and livelihood of the communities of farmers and pastoralists in the country. The FAO intervened in Kenya by providing expertise, support, resources, and equipment to bring the locust invasion under control. Sergeant Brian and the National Youth Servicemen and Servicewomen received training on how to conduct monitoring and control operations.
The FAO, Food and Agricultural Organization, they came to our college. They were given permission to train our servicemen and servicewomen to go and do the control team.
The involvement of the National Youth Service in the control operation was successful, and now Kenya has the expertise and capacity to face new threats. Sergeant Brian is actually training servicemen and servicewomen to be prepared to manage any resurgence of the pest.
This was a very good experience. Since this desert locust menace came into our country, the National Youth Service has been in the forefront, and the delivery has been so well. Because if the National Service didn't go outside there, the kind of destruction that we would have experienced would have been vast. Now, it was timely that we went outside there, and the delivery was, I can say, 100%.
The FAO operates a global system that monitors desert locusts and provides early warnings to locust-affected countries. In addition, it supports governments to monitor and respond to desert locust emergencies by strengthening national capacity and providing technical guidance in the planning and execution of control campaigns.
And back here in Nigeria, a country heavily reliant on revenues from its crude oil exports, entrepreneur Ifedolakpo Runshewe has identified an alternative type of black gold, used car tires, as she set up Freetown Waste Management's Recycle, which she says is Nigeria's first industrial plant dedicated to transforming old tires into paving bricks, floor tiles, and other goods that are in high demand in Africa's most populous nation. Take a look.
A batch of used tires is being processed at the Freetown Waste Management Recycle factory in the city of Ibadan in southwest Nigeria. The $5 million facility was set up by entrepreneur Ifedolakpo Runshewe, who says it is Nigeria's first industrial plant dedicated to transforming old tires into paving bricks, floor tiles, and other goods that are in high demand in Africa's most populous nation.
Creating something new from something that would otherwise be lying somewhere as waste, as was part of the motivation, like what can we be doing from this in terms of upcycling or recycling, which is why we started out with tires. And most people don't know that for your tires, the entire component of a tire is valuable in terms of the metal in the tire, the fiber in the tire.
Waste management in Nigeria is patchy at best. In villages, towns, and cities, piles of waste are a common sight, and often residents burn them at night for lack of a safer method of disposal. Tires are routinely dumped and abandoned. Freetown relies on scavengers who collect old tires from dumping grounds. Some tires are also supplied directly by motor mechanics. They are paid 70 to 100 naira per tire.
Tires would ideally just lay waste. You would find them in drainages. You just find them in a corner, stockpiled, nothing to do with them. But now we are able to, create an entire value chain around the tires. The organizers know that if they get the tires across to us, they're going to get paid.
At the Lagos Jet Ski Riders Club, a membership-only club that caters to water sports enthusiasts, a 760 square meter children's play area has been layered with the paving bricks from Freetown waste.
I believe it's important that we support anybody that recycles in our country, and taking tires, which are an environmental nuisance, and turning them into something that children can play on, I think is a win-win for everybody.
Freetown started operations in 2020 with just 4 employees, and growth has been so rapid, the workforce has jumped to 128. The new production lines could help the company reach a target of recycling 15 million tires annually.
Amazing stories coming out of Africa. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.